Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in. Hello, Zena here. I am actually just sitting on my front porch. We've had a lovely few days here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in Tacoma, Washington, so we just get some lovely weather. Anyway, summertime is glorious. So anyway, I'm just out on the front porch enjoying that. As you can tell, Mark and I aren't doing our typical banter this time around because he is at Friends Club in the mountains of BC. And anyway, I just thought I'd pop in and share just a couple things I've been thinking about actually this week. This term collaboration, we hear it a lot and it takes various forms. And I've just been thinking about it a lot, what it means to actually collaborate and work together and have shared goals and outcomes, and what that looks like, how we can do it differently than we may have done it in the past so that we can get further together. So I've been really pondering that this week. And also connection, connecting dots and connecting people in interesting ways. It kind of goes into the interview we're going to hear in just a minute or so with Adam Rowe. He is a production designer and he heard the episode. It's so great. He heard the episode we did a little while ago with Joe Madziak, who is a construction coordinator, and he got in touch and he's like, hey, I was on the other end of that, or I was the production designer on the other end of that story that Joe told. And so anyway, we talked all through it. I hope you guys like it, but it just sparked this great conversation about connection. And then got in touch with Joe. We're going to do one together with Adam and Joe. It's going to, this is the stuff that it gets me so excited because there are all these cool connections and stories and stuff from behind the scenes that we're excited to bring forward for you all. So I've been thinking a lot about that and how to do that more. And if you have any connections to either the people that we've talked to or connections that you want to bring forward that you think should be on the show, get in touch. Let us know. You can go to the Tie-In Podcast website. You can go to LinkedIn and just DM me. Those are a couple things on my mind this week, and hope you guys are doing well out there. Keep up the great work and get in touch, like, subscribe, and talk to you soon.
Welcome back to the Tie-In. I'm coming to you here from the mountains near Lillooet, where I'm currently co-hosting a 300-person off-grid music, community arts festival. It's called Friends Club. I've mentioned it before. But yeah, so we're deep in the mountains here. It's on a beautiful piece of property, and there's a canyon with a beautiful river running through and just vistas galore. It's our second year here on this land, and we've got, like I said, 300 people, and the whole thing is powered off of solar as much as possible. And we've created with backup with generator, and we've created kind of 3 power nodes or 3 areas where we need power. We've got like the kitchen, we've got the main stage and another lounge area, and then we've got another area down the land closer to the sort of the cliff edge, and a lot of it's so we're using volt stack 5Ks with solar. So during the daytime, we're all solar. Our kitchen area has like fridges and freezers and lighting, that kind of thing, and a little lounge area there. And then the main stage area we can do on solar, no problem, during the daytime. And then at night, it's way more economic to just swap over to the generators because we've got a lot of lighting, a lot of things there that need to be powered at night. And then we've got another area that's kind of another chill area down by that cliff area. We've got saunas, a slip and slide. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, this is the update. This is where I'm at right now today. But as you can see, I am living it. I put my money where my mouth is. And I think this has been, a part that's kept me sane over the years. When I was doing portable electric, I always loved to say that I would trust my own life on the gear that we built, and still am today. So yeah, I love it. Love being out here. It does take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and that's about it. Cheers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the tie-in. Today, we are speaking with Adam Rowe. Adam is an entertainment production designer and art director with experience ranging from pop-up environments, game shows, live events, parades, concerts, scripted television, and movies. He's been a part of several art departments that have been nominated for an Art Directors Guild Award, like Parks and Recreation, Good Place, Mad Men, and won an Emmy for the art direction on Rent on Fox. Adam has been in the entertainment industry for years and has a wealth of experience to share. Yay!
Yay.
Amazing.
Yes, thank
Welcome, Adam. Welcome to the podcast. And we love speaking about this. This is one of our favorite topics on the podcast, and people love it because it's visual, it's tangible, it's actionable. So maybe to start, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the entertainment industry and into art direction.
Sure. I am a theater person. We all share the love for Joe Maziak, and I'm going to bring it up right away because he's
Yeah.
the person who has connected us all, and he's also a theater person. And that was actually how one of our first bonding moments was when we talked about how much we love theater. I didn't start off in theater. I was born in the middle of Illinois, and jobs, what I was going to do for a living, it felt destined to be some kind of engineer. My dad had worked with engineering. He was like an industrial plumber and farmer and, an operator for a backhoe. And my mom worked for an engineering firm, a civil engineering firm. And I always designed roller coasters on paper and liked Legos and did what a lot of people like, building things, roller coaster tycoon, which
Yeah.
was a kid. So like things kind of pushed me in that direction, and I went to University of Wisconsin-Platteville. That was an engineering school, and about halfway through my freshman into my sophomore year, I was failing at a lot of the things, and knew that I couldn't do the physics, and I was getting a D in chemistry and a C in calculus, and it just wasn't panning out. And at that time, I basically, had a finite amount of money, and I went to the admissions office at Southern Illinois University when I had to switch schools because there was no point in being in an engineering school anymore. I said, how much can I get with this? And I showed, the admissions office, like how much money I had. And they're like, well, you could be, and you could get a degree in English or maybe theater without starting over. And
Right.
so I met with the theater instructor, Ron Naverson, who talked about how they had a colleague who was doing Sesame Street in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, wherever it was. And I was like, oh, wow. And I had, had theater in high school. It wasn't like I was completely naive, but there was no point in my life where someone said, you can make a living at this that isn't like in a van down by a river. And so, having somebody be like, you can like, maybe not right away, but your friends who are teachers or policemen who have, are buying houses, you might be able to do that one day too. And so I went to school at Southern Illinois in theater, and very quickly, I gravitated to scenic artwork and props and got really excited. And just like anything else, you kind of discover you get good at something when you love it. People say you have to do what you love. And I, from then on, I've been doing entertainment. And I think there's two other like crossroads. We all come into those moments where you have to choose left or right. One was post 9/11 when the entertainment industry kind of froze. I had just graduated. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. And New York was too big and LA was too, full of and graffiti. And I could never move there. Like, how could I do
Still
that?
is.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I ended up applying to the University of Illinois' opera program, and I ended up painting their scenery on they had a word for it. Assistantship is probably what it was called. And so, I decided to do that. And then I got my master's in theater over 3 years, which bought me some time. and I painted scenery. I moved all over the country, and about 5 or 6 years of living not out of my car like a van down by the river, but moving from from Florida to Southern California to Colorado to Indiana. And I got a lot of experience and I met a lot of talented people, but it was not very fulfilling. I felt a little bit more like a
Yeah.
carnival person than, having a real life. And this is pre-social media. So like maintaining friendships, doing my taxes, that was all tough. And so a friend was like, "Why don't you try Los Angeles?" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's still full of graffiti and." But no, I remember my dad tapping me on the back when I decided to move, and he was like, don't do drugs. That's all that's there." And that's a real interpretation of what people can think of what LA is. And then I moved here. It took 3 years to finally unpack my life, and that crossroads came when I was working at a scene shop that was doing Forever 21 clothing stores. And if you've ever been in one of those, they're all white. And so I was in a shipping container in a Tyvek suit painting white cabinets for 44 Forever 21 stores, most of which were going to the Middle East. And I can remember we would write on the back of the cabinets, USA loves you, wherever they were going in the world. And I was like, this isn't good, though. This isn't theater. This can't be my life painting white cabinets. And so a friend whose name is Tim was like, you need to meet someone. And I went and I met Dan Bishop at a coffee shop on a Sunday. He hired me to start on a Monday, and that was on the TV show Mad Men. I didn't even know
Oh,
what that show was. I hadn't read the script. I just was happy to be out of a Tyvek suit and working. And I was the PA on season 1 of Mad Men, and I helped find all the artwork that's in the credits or most of it, and the posters. And there's even a an office door that has my name on it between Paul and Don Draper because the art director names, and my office was craft service. So people always knew Adam Rowe because that's where coffee was in the morning. And that is really what set me up for television, and I've never looked back. So sorry that took a little long, but
Yeah.
that's the path. And people always want to know how it happens, and it's a lot of luck and a lot of hard.
Yeah.
totally.
Just one quick clarification question. So you weren't building any of these things at the time, right? You were art directing, and from day on you've been art directing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was
No.
basically a painter and set designer.
Yeah.
And I did scenery, but as much as everybody wants to design scenery for Broadway or design, it's really hard. I worked at the Denver Center for a while, and I remember meeting a production designer or set designer in theater, and she said I have to do 18 shows in theater a year minimum to even make a baseline life. And I just remember
Wow.
having a moment where like, gosh, 18 shows a year seems like an impossible feat. And
Yeah.
another push that actually got me into television. And it's not that it gets easier, being candid. It's just I like the slightly more stability, although right now there's a lot of peaks and valleys in all entertainment. But I also found that I really liked television. The storytelling is different than theater, and I just honestly, I didn't find that I had a future in theater, but I kept my theater roots. And then I say all this, and then I had my dream job, which was working on Rent. I mean, I used
Mm.
to mow the lawn when I was 14, listening to disc two over and over and over again of Rent. And then to be in a world where my name could be brought up to be the art director for that was, I couldn't even have thought that that could happen. You can only imagine what you know and or what you think you know. I didn't know that that job or that show could ever even be on television. They sang La Boheme on Fox. Like, who would have thought that would have happened?
Right. 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 Well, I just, like when people talk about, art direction, I always get chills because I know how, like, you know, I know enough to know that it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of foresight and a lot of, trying to figure out how to bring, what's on the page to life. Um, and I'm always in awe when I hear folks talk about it. So first off, thank you for all the
No
stuff that
problem.
you've done.
And I guess
Um,
I just point out one thing that I think is important, and it's just because the entertainment industry has this fault, is how I'll look at it, where when someone does something, that is the thing that they do. And yet the entirety of our business is built on people doing a lot of things.
yeah.
Meaning, if someone is really good at game shows, they get typecast as the
Hmm.
game show guy, or
Mm.
someone's really good at doing crime drama. That's what she does, and she's the crime drama person. And I have been incredibly lucky, but it takes a lot of tenacity and a lot of pushing to keep changing my career style. And I did live events and I did do parade floats and I have done game shows and I did work on the Super Bowl and the Democratic National Convention. And I'm so, so proud of that, but it takes a lot of effort. And I want to be vocal about that because it's one of the things in this industry that if you talk to fellow colleagues, it's really frustrating that I talked to the guy recently who did Hell's Kitchen. He's an incredibly talented production designer, and that's what he does, but that isn't what the only thing he can do, you know?
Right. 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 Okay. So different types of projects. And so what is that? So when you talk about tenacity, can we just, like double
Yeah.
click on that a little bit? Like, what does that actually look like? Are you going out? I mean, I can imagine like, you've got people who work in, TV world and you've got people who work in, advertising world and you've got people, like how are you connecting with all those folks and getting your name out there? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the tenacity comes from determination to kind of keep evolving with the business. So, for instance, the days of Craigslist job postings are gone, but I did get a job through Craigslist at one time in my life. I
Hmm.
also got a job on Facebook. I became the art director of Criminal Minds because I answered a Facebook post. And now there's LinkedIn, and you read my bio from LinkedIn, and like we're
Yeah.
learning that that's obviously becoming a really handy tool. I'm late
Right.
to the game on LinkedIn because most of my jobs have become through name dropping. So not
Yeah.
name
Right.
dropping. Well, maybe it is
Word of
name dropping.
mouth. Yeah.
Like networking, just the word of mouth, networking.
Yeah. And like told people when, Chris, it was, what was it? Christmas Story was on television and there was The Sound of Music was on TV. I was, in the world of the art directors who were working on those projects, and I just kept saying when I would see them at social events, I would love to work on a musical one day. I come from theater, and eventually that soundbite made it through someone to the right person who was a producer who ended up doing Rent. So that's how I got that job. The parade floats came from me telling people I've always wanted to work in theme parks. And so if there's one
Mm.
piece of advice that I can say to people who are listening, like you have to tell people what you want. You really
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
You can't say, "Oh, well, I kind of work in entertainment." There isn't a job that's kind of entertainment. There is a window dresser, there is a theme park designer, there is a queue line designer. And once you start saying those things to people, you'll be surprised how people are like, "Oh, right this way. Let me introduce you to the people who do that." I'm oversimplifying things.
Hmm.
Then the second chapter is, I was working in crime drama and I did Criminal Minds. I did I think I did 300 dead bodies. Like, that number
Wow.
stands out in my mind. 70 episodes of Criminal Minds, The Murder of Versace, Rizzoli and Isles. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, 6 or 7 years of murdering people for a living is like getting to me. I'm not sleeping at night. And the next job that was offered to me was a show called Valor, which was another show that had, gun violence in it. And then I think there was one other one. Let's just say there were two jobs that were coming to me, and I should be grateful, right? But I couldn't be the guy who was saying that weapon is cool anymore. And I was in a production meeting when I was like, we haven't put battery acid in somebody's eyes in a while. And people are like, ooh, good idea. I'm like, ooh, is that the kind of stuff that should be coming out of my mouth? My mom would be so disappointed. So I had to take a step back. I went from being a production designer to an assistant art director, like a big step back, which, a lot of people say you shouldn't do. But I did it. I went on to do The Last Tycoon, and I took that job because it was 1930s, which I had never done, and it was with a designer named Patricia von Brandenstein who did Chorus Line and Amadeus, and I was like, I have to learn from this person. And
Hmm.
the art director had done Guardians of the Galaxy. I have to learn from this person. So I took those steps back to learn from those people, and then my career changed again. So it's
Uh-huh.
just like you have to find those crossroads if you want to really make that change.
Right. And it's still so interesting that the film entertainment industry, there's still an apprenticeship there to it where you're learning from the greats, you're learning from folks and you go in there. That's pretty unique for this industry and especially for an arts-based industry.
No, Mark, you're so right because, like, the phrase flash and trash, and we'll talk about the trash part in a little
Yeah.
bit. The flash and trash is a real thing, and it is a industry that has survived on secrecy. And why that secrecy is still maintained is still really a mystery to me because it's all over social media and like I get that Marvel has to keep their, storyline secret and it's all about the surprise ending and I do understand those things. But the like making of it
Hmm.
Hmm.
is still, and actually people love seeing behind the scenes. I mean, how
Yeah.
many people
Ooh.
like to sit in the front row of a theater project and like look up at the lights and how's the scenery moving. And then there's a whole bunch of people that don't care about all that stuff. They're probably not listening to the podcast, but
Yeah,
the
exactly.
people who do love it, it's just like, why are we secret? We don't have to be so secret. At least that's where I sit on it. And
Yeah.
that is part of the reason why I value your podcast and your guys' talent to put this out there is because there's no textbook. And if there was, it's outdated,
Yeah.
So it's like we have to share how we do these things, unless
Yeah.
it's like proprietary, I suppose.
Hmm. Hmm. But like it's the word of mouth. It's talking about this stuff. It's, bringing forth like, just like hearing, because this is such a connected industry, just socially connected and word of mouth and this and that, like this is where, information like travels like wildfire. When there's a cool idea, like, everybody will start to
Hmm.
know and then think they, want to try it or whatever the case, if there's a cool material or whatever it is. And so I'm like, well, let's put sustainability into that and let's put circularity in and let's, try and make that cool and get the word out. And,
Well, to kind
it,
of go, not to go back to that tenacity comment one more time, but like it is the Television Academy of Arts and
mhm.
science is inherently about discovery. And that word gets dropped so often when people
Hmm.
talk about the Academy. I'm pretty sure the Oscars has a science component too, because it's light and sound and technology. And we are at a crossroads again where we have AI and people are living in fear
Yeah.
about it. I am not that way. I'm actually very excited by AI and I look at it as a tool that could help me go home at 10 hours. Like, yes, why
Right.
wouldn't I want that? I'm not, replacing illustrators. Illustrators who are good are going to use it and they're going to do their projects faster. But this has happened before. When we went from film cameras to digital cameras, there were a lot of people who refused to learn. When we went
Yeah.
from hand animation to computer animation, when we went from real models to digital models. So the industry is the science part. And that is where this value, again, this exchange of idea gathering on the fireplace becomes so valuable because the entertainment industry moves so quickly
Yeah.
and so slow at the same time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
new things are happening always in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there really is a dichotomous force there. There's a resistance. It's fascinating, and that's a big thing we talk a lot about here on the podcast. Um, and in terms of sustainability, so part of the conversation here that and why we first why we met you, how we met you in person at the Creative Industries Opportunity Space at Lacey during LA Climate Week, and you did an amazing presentation and you shared a case study about reusing sets. And so that's something that we love to do, especially here for the listeners that we're going to do hopefully you're going to pull up a slideshow, so we're going to be able to actually see the work that you've done and talk a little bit about the set that you've done. So for those listeners, this will be on YouTube that you can pop on and listen and see the stuff in action. But yeah, we'd
Mhm.
love to dig in a little bit and see some of the work that you've been doing and talk us through.
Your name has come up, talk about, people knowing each other. You mentioned Joe Madziak earlier. I mean, he talked about your work on a podcast that we did, I don't know, months ago. And then I
Yeah.
finally started connecting dots and I'm like, wait a second, we just saw Adam.
Yeah.
So it's just super cool.
It is very cool. And I can't, I'm going to double down on it again. I'm just very thankful that you guys are doing what you're doing because the exposure of it is a little bit contagious. And I do say that Joe Maziak is patient zero because I hadn't been exposed to someone so ardent and so passionate about reuse. And I want to be clear that this is not new. Lots and lots of TV shows reuse things and lots of movies. I mean, you can look at Holiday Inn And then like 8 years later, there was White Christmas, and it was the same set. The Golden Girls Kitchen that we all know
Yeah.
and love is from a pilot called It Takes Two. So all the things that we talk about are old news, but we've for some reason, and I think you talked about this with Joe, like why did it come out of favor? Like why did we step away from it? Was it because, luxury TV came into the spotlight and we want
Hmm.
everything brand new? I can't wrap my head around that. I gotta believe that Game of Thrones reused things, and I have to
Yeah.
believe that the studio, which is amazingly rich and beautiful, has repurposed stuff, but
Yeah.
maybe not. I don't know. Um,
Well, especially here in Canada, where funds are very, very limited, right? Yet people have to do more with less. So it's something very Canadian. And maybe we get that from the British side of things, but definitely in the US, I mean, I'm sure there was a lot more money flowing through the productions, and it probably became easier to just build from scratch than to go and find and reuse. But
Well, I
yeah,
will
who
say,
knows?
not to poke on that, and I don't know what our time
Yeah.
is, but I do want to say that having worked in Vancouver, Toronto, Los Angeles, and then as a theater person all over the United States, it is something that people poke fun of about Canadian spirit, but it is really real. And I genuinely
Yeah.
believe your reuse plan comes from this inherent compassion that Canadian spirit has. And I was witness to it. I've plugged into it, and it's not just kindness, it's sharing, it's caring, it's all those things. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a culture in Toronto specifically that is far, far friendlier than Los Angeles. Not and I'm sure there's some LA people who are rolling their eyes and shaking their fists, but like we are more secretive here, and I think that comes from the institutions of places like Disney and Marvel, and maybe even certain branches of television that want to keep their thing.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
but I didn't find that in Toronto. I found a much more neighborly approach to like, how do we help this? You also have that list that tells, what shows people are working on. It's a more organized
Yeah.
environment when it comes to caring about who's working on what. There is no list like that in Los Angeles. So just a different experience altogether on how you treat. And I think a part of it is that it's smaller, so there's a little bit of like a family component to it where LA is so much bigger and there's so many different kinds. It's hard to manage. It's more of like an amoeba here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's
Makes
true.
sense.
Cool. Well, I really want folks to hear about your set reuse experience. So I wondered if you could walk us through, the presentation that you did at LA Climate Week. And
Yes,
yeah,
happy to do
so
it. So
cool.
I call this, good glam lock. And I think I have to back up just a little bit to kind of give people some context. So in 2020, so 5 years ago,
Hmm.
I designed a set for the medical drama Good Sam in Toronto. And then 4 years later, it followed me to Los Angeles after I transformed it into a makeup headquarters. So it was being rethemed for a makeup headquarters for a stunning diva. And then I did it again for a septuagenarian sleuth, which is Maddie Matlock. And then I rescued it from the dumpster with help from Joe. So, like, there's a
Yeah.
lot to break down in that tiny little sentence. So we designed the CBS medical drama Good Sam not just for aesthetics, but it was designed for long-term use with production efficiency in mind. And that came from the showrunner and the producers who wanted to make sure that they had quick access to off-camera support and they had quick ways to roll in and turn the lights on. So the set from the beginning, and Good Sam is the scenery that's on the far right of this image. It was designed to be as shooter friendly and aesthetically friendly for the show simultaneously, where lots of times things are designed for look and function comes later. I mean, that the perfect example is that you build a beautiful bedroom and then you have to figure out how to wile the wall. Well,
Hmm.
I was instructed from the beginning, put those together. And so through the help of Joe, we kind of really focused on modularity and quick access. And, when you think about 35 crew members getting out of a set quickly, you need a lot of double doors. So that's essentially part of how it all came to be. But then
Hmm.
how do you actually make sure that you don't step on aesthetics? And so the showrunner, Katie Wesh, and the executive producer, Jenny Erman, they really knew that speed was key in Good Sam, but they also wanted it to be filled with sunlight and warmth and aspiration. And I'm giving this backstory because those things laid the foundation that allowed for the flexibility that comes later. But we didn't know this was going to happen at the time. We just thought we were making Good Sam. And Good Sam had 7 or 8 major characters, and we had a lot of story to tell. So we had to, scenery wise, we had a lot of story to tell too. So fast forward, sadly, Good Sam was canceled after 13 episodes, and Frank Siracusa and John Weber, who are, incredible producers in the city of Toronto, who I think are part of Wiseacre, although I don't know if they still call that name anymore.
They do.
Okay, they
Yeah.
do. That's
Yeah.
good. I hide that. They are at the apex of respect for me. I mean, these two people have done so much for television and so much for the community of Toronto. It's, I'm not blowing smoke. I've been there firsthand. I just respect them so much. But they said to me, "What can we do with this set, essentially?" And I was like, "Well, you guys are doing Star Trek. It could be a spaceship. It could be an FBI headquarters. It could be a lot of other things." And I had learned from Criminal Minds that, which is a show that has a different police station in the country every week. So one week you're doing Phoenix, the next week you're doing Miami, and the next week you're doing an Alpine police station. And so how they did it is that they just had a floating ceiling and some carpet and a bunch of rat maze kind of walls that you could flip and turn and you could make it. So this set, Good Sam, was already designed to do that because we didn't know what these cardiologists were going to be doing over, what could have been 5 seasons of medical drama. So when the show was canceled and we had made a large investment into it, it was like, what are we going to do? So it was a sprawling cardiology hospital that now was going to become a makeup headquarters. So let me go to the next slide here. So what you're seeing is some of the images from Good Sam. So it's important to kind of look at this image here. This was the waiting room. There is patient room number 1, patient room number 2, and then an ER room. And these were kind of flipped and turned to make different kinds of rooms
Mhm.
because you have different kinds of needs. A hospital is a little bit like a spaceship because you kind of have tools and equipment per part of your spaceship. So then what we're seeing here is Good Sam on the right, Glamorous in the middle, and Matlock on the left. And they are taken from the same point of view. So you're seeing patient room 1 on the top right.
Uh-huh.
You're seeing what was the graphic art department in Glamorous, and then Olympia's office in Matlock. So these are taken from the same view. And I've shown these slides, and people are like, well, how did you know to take the shot from the same place? And part of it was chance, but I also knew that this was the science experiment here. This
Yeah.
was like, what can we get away with? Because there's a lot of acceptance you have to trust from the audience that they will forgive and forget. That's kind of the phrase that I've been using to learn. And what people forget are that the windows are the same and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the ceiling is the same. And what they forgive is the story, meaning they care about the story. They don't really care so much always about the walls. As much as the production editor is precious about every choice, there's a lot they can get over. So you're seeing the same here. You're seeing Good Sam on the bottom here, Glamorous, the same staircase. You can kind of see Joe's fine work here. And I just have to point out the person who made the stairs. His name is Tread, and you can't get a better pun in the industry than that. But the man who makes stairs is Tread. And he just made an amazing staircase, so amazing. It moved on a semi truck and now is standing on at Paramount here in this image. So the
Right.
set was moved from LA to
From
That's
Toronto,
that's
to
the one
LA.
Joe talked
Yeah,
about on the
exactly.
podcast. Yes. Oh my
Right.
gosh. Now we have a visual.
And through
Yeah.
Okay.
your podcast, I learned that there were more stumbling blocks. So you're actually going to get the American side of the challenges because you've already talked about the Toronto side of the challenges, which
Yeah.
was the change of truck. Like I didn't know that there was a truck that, you'd think a truck could go from Toronto to California, but we learned on the podcast that it couldn't. And then there was a storage issue allegedly, and I'll get to those in just a second. I just want to point out that one of the many challenges of reusing scenery is cataloging and caring for it. And I'm going to show pictures, I think, a little bit further along here. But I want to just tell you just a little bit more about Good Sam so we kind of understand. This was actually from this picture right here It's from UTM for Mississauga. So this building was the MN building, and it was sitting basically unused during the pandemic, which is why Good Sam benefited from using it. And I love to point this out because this building is about as environmentally friendly as the UTM campus likes to tote about. And it now is still living on Matlock because these windows and this form and these ceilings I copied from this real building that's environmentally sound, and now it's living on. And I just find that all to be so like coincidental and
Looks
wonderful.
great.
Hard to, rationalize.
Can't tell. You can't tell. I mean, it's incredible.
So all of these are the same room. So this is again reusing scenery. This is that Golden Girls philosophy. There's reusing scenery, and then there's re-theming scenery like as a whole permanent set. So these are just kind of redoing, we have a dark room, and then we have a light room, and then we have a different room. So that's kind of done in television across the board. But what was really a big experiment was how do we get this permanent set, this massive set that, filled up two sound stages to look like a new thing. And that was where I had to trust in Frank and John. I had to go into the producers of Glamorous and be like, hey, I know what you're seeing looks like a hospital, but we can make it look like, a new place. And,
Mhm.
that's a tall design challenge. And I'm not going to lie, it was nerve-wracking because I didn't have a lot of prep. I had to do it really, really quickly. And it worked. And so then when it worked on Glamorous, we're
Yeah.
seeing the same shot. Here's the Glamorous conference room. You can see the waiting room in the distance here. You're seeing the Glamorous reception desk, which, took the place of the glamour of the Good Sam nurses station. So, as we look at the detective work here, one of the other things that paid off wonderfully so is that the lighting was done in RGB tape so that, as the shows change, you can see how it's pink and glamorous. And it was, that actually worked out really well. And the DPs really loved this ring light, which was basically me using the social media ring light that we see all the time on
Hmm.
TikTok videos and putting it on the ceilings so
On
that performers had even light. And it just worked so well. It's been living with all three shows. And I
It's
just
great.
found it to be a great
A-
experiment as well.
Adam, any resistance or what resistance did you face as you were, you're talking us through this like it was easy. Um, were there moments where there was sort of like, nope, we're not going to do it, and you had to sort of really make the pitch for it, or was it always, yep, no problem, this is a great idea, let's go for it?
It's a very good question. So we'll take it in stages. When we
Yeah.
went from Good Sam to Glamorous, it was a fairly easy sell. And the reason why is because Frank and John were on board, number one. Number two, Glamorous's budget did not allow for an expansive set. And Glamorous operated a little bit like a soap opera. So you again had a lot of story to tell. You were mostly following, the two main characters, but there were a lot of what would be considered side stories. And so we knew we needed a bathroom and a break room and two offices and, elevator cabs. And so to start over and do it from scratch for the 9 or 8 episodes, I can't remember how we did, was economically probably not possible,
Mhm.
or it would have just been a really small set. And so to be able to walk into a production, or sorry, a concept meeting to meet the showrunner and the producer to say, hey, look what you could have, it lubricated the wheels. And I'm certain it helped me get the job because not every designer can inherit another designer's work. Like that's just a reality. Like no, not a lot of designers want to take somebody else's work and then
Yeah.
make it their own. But for some reason, we do that on locations all the time. I mean, the same five
Yeah.
buildings
Yeah.
in Toronto get shot 400 times, and
Same
every
here in
time.
Vancouver. They've even
Yeah,
put up permanent power kiosks because they don't even
use the
they
same
just
place.
there's yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we for some reason we have a philosophy about it that's okay with locations, but we don't have a philosophy with it with permanent sets. And so I'm here to kind of fill that gap. And so with Good Sam to Glamorous, it kind of came easier. What's been really fun too is the people who are part of Good Sam feel very proud of it. So that part worked well. And then when we went from Glamorous to Matlock, that came out of a economic decision as well, because a lot of the fancier, more beautiful offices in Toronto don't want you to shoot there, or
Mm.
they're so saturated with shooting. And I'm thinking about the Adelaide building, and I don't remember the address, but everybody's there. Suits has been there. I mean, a lot of people love that building, and we love that building too, which is where our lobby scenes were done on Glamorous. but they will only let you film on weekends, and they're very expensive to, to have for filming. And, we filming crews are a little bit like scarabs. They come in and they, get up all in the walls and they're pulling on things and light switches don't work and they're mad because they don't have access. Like, so can we just do it on stage? That's basically how the pilot for
Yeah.
Matlock kind of came. And so it was like, how can we turn, Glamorous, which at that point was not canceled? How can we turn Glamorous into Matlock temporarily? And so that was a little bit difficult to sell and very difficult to do on a budget for a pilot and on a time of, but it came out of economics.
Yeah.
So we did it. And then when the strike happened and Glamorous's fate, was decided and it was not going to move forward, this is where it got hard. And I don't know if it was strike related. I don't know if it was personnel related, and CBS and Paramount and Skydance, there's company, merging things going on.
Hmm.
I don't know where all that landed. I just know that it was hard. And I know that if Joe Maziak hadn't called me and said, hey, we're putting together a budget essentially for striking of what was then the Glamorous set, I just was like, oh my God, we cannot do that. It's so much steel and so much glass. I mean, just look at these windows here. I mean,
Yeah.
I think he said in the previous podcast, it was like $500,000 in steel and
Yeah.
glass, which makes
Yeah.
everybody's eyes bug out. But that comes from the original Good Sam, which was all about sunlight and healing and making people feel the warmth of a medical drama, not the sterility of a medical drama. Well, here comes Matlock needing spyness and looking in, and the Hudson Yards skyscrapers and Midtown skyscrapers. So it's like, guys, it's all here. We have an amazing staircase that goes to nowhere. We got to do this. And so the obstacles were, there was a lot of them. And I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you, it was probably 5 weeks of pure dedication on a lot of people's shoulders. John Weber, Frank Siracusa, Joe Maziak, the Patricia Fast Palmer, who was here in the US, and then me. And not only that, the documentation and the
Hmm.
manifesting, like,
Right.
but what was great about Joe and why Joe soars in this is he was able to show you, like, hey, it's going to cost this much to throw it away, or it's going to cost it this much to put it
Yeah.
in a truck. And
Yeah.
then when it got, the first stumbling block, which is where do we store it? Which, my head exploded when I heard that, because it was like, where do we store it? No one's filming anything. Like, there's the parking lots and storage facilities galore in Los Angeles. But then again, the person who could be making that decision is very disconnected from this. So that's not blame. That's just like, oh,
Yeah.
we have to fill that gap of information. And it's very easy for people to be like, oh, producers, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's fair. I think it's that there's just explanation and knowledge. And if everybody's worried about the bottom line, you need to show them that the bottom line actually is still the bottom line, whether you throw it away or reuse it. There's
Yeah.
not that much cost savings.
Hmm.
So the political aspect was hard, and then the documentation and the showing people that we can save money. And then the icing on that cake, or the cherry on top of that story, is that when Matlock's amort budget to build the permanent sets here in Los Angeles came in, I think a lot of people were really shocked that it wasn't cheap, because, oh my gosh, we just spent all this money to move the scenery here. I think it was like $17,000 US to pay to move the scenery from Toronto to Los Angeles, but that doesn't include the labor on the strike side, and it doesn't include the labor on the building side.
Hmm.
But that's because prices of glass and steel went up so much from 2020
Hmm.
when we did this, 2021 to 2024. So it's like, in the United States, you can buy a forever stamp and that price stays the same. We had forever stamps, metaphorically speaking, in
Yeah.
past, because the prices were going up, but yet we had, 75 panes of glass and, X amount of linear feet. So it's hard to quantify. Also, labor prices have gone so far up.
Yeah.
But when you have a puzzle at home and you put it together the first time, it goes together, efficiently. Now, when you have to put that puzzle together the second time, whether it's a broken radio or a car engine, you're going to have extra pieces and things don't fit as well. That's exactly what re-putting a setup is like.
Hmm.
And shows in the history of reused scenery have burned the bridges for producers. When Veep,
Hmm.
if somebody knows the real story, I'd love it, because I only know hearsay. But when it moved from Baltimore to Los Angeles, they had the White House and they had Sawzall lines through dental molding and they just cut the walls wherever they cut them to fit them into storage containers and they didn't pack it. They just shipped it across the country and they wobbled the whole way across Route 80 all the way across the United States. So by the time they showed up, they were trash.
Yeah,
And so now you just spent all this money to reuse scenery and you shipped garbage.
yeah,
So it's like there's so many components to reuse, but as the world of efficiency and budgets get tinier, we have to learn how to do it better. And this is a flagship case of successfully doing that. Sorry
it's
that that's
amazing.
a monologue, but there's a lot to share there.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, I can see how shipping and packing, I mean, sometimes those are, the folks on one end don't think about, what it's going to look like when people receive it, but it's super important. I remember Joe saying like they packed it so well, the glass made it, everything made it, and you were able to reuse. So
Yeah, so this is the documentation that we had to create. So just to kind of walk you through them briefly, because there's a lot of dense information that you might not be able to read. But this was the shipping manifest, so which had to be weighed. It had it had a number. It tells us, how much weight it is right here. So they had to weigh everything because it had to cross the
Right.
border.
And that's 21, that's almost 22,000 pounds from what I can read there.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And look at how beautiful this is. I
oh
give this
yeah.
hug to whoever made this. I don't know if it was Jamie or who made it. But it was like a useful tool because then we knew how to get it. And then for every single object, there was a drawing that told us what it was, and then it was all labeled. And so
Oh,
from this, during my prep town, and it's important to note that I got 1 week of prep before we had to get rolling on this stuff. I went through the new ground plan. So this is the new ground plan here at Oh, actually, yeah, this is the new ground plan here at Paramount. And so orange was stuff that was sent, that was sitting in a trailer that took 2 weeks to get here or whatever it took. And then the green was new. And so we could start building before the stuff arrived. And that was a crucial part of it. And Joe talks about carpenter dimensions and art department dimensions. The carpenter dimensions are a crucial part of that puzzle. And then kind of the last part to talk about on the pitch, or sorry, on the presentation, is that, I say that Joe Maziak is patient zero. It is contagious. And you both know this, that once you start, you can get the ball rolling a little bit faster. And once CBS caught on that I was a designer who was willing to bend and be flexible, and Jenny Erman, the showrunner, was interested in also being environmentally friendly, they had thrown away or were throwing away the Fatal Attraction sets. And that's what's on the right here, Fatal Attraction. And so I repurposed them and used them for Matlock. And you can see the tile up here was just covered up. And it's still sitting there to this day underneath, because if Matlock ever has a flashback, we can go back to the 70s. And Nina, who was the production designer on this original Fatal Attraction, we're still living with her good decisions. So it can become, you don't just have to stop, is what I'm saying, is you can keep going, and you can just keep saying, and we're doing it now in season 2. Papa's House was a show that was on, got canceled. And so we're going to the warehouse and we're reusing on broader scales. And the like soundbite that I love to say is it's more than using reusable water bottles on set. We have to scale up and think about it on a big show production level, and big sets can help. The end.
I love it.
There's obviously so much to talk about, but like,
Yeah, this is, I
those are
mean,
the
this is
big
a
nuts
just
and
a
bolts.
teaser. Um, wow. That's
I
there's
love
just
it.
so much going on here. And I love that you also did touch on that there's a political angle here, right? There's a transportation angle, there's a creative angle. I mean, there's literally feels like a 5 or 6 point touch points there that you're navigating to get this through. But in the end, it still comes down to economics, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
at
would
the
say
end.
that one of the lessons that I've learned
Yeah.
that I would love to share is that it's very, I guess it's very, I guess the word is PR, although the world's changing too, to say environmentally friendly. And when the movie Free Willy came out, like everybody was like, yeah, Earth. And we're not really that way right now, sadly. I mean,
No.
people are internally, but not public facing. And so I've been kind of rebranding it as efficiency,
Yes.
because that seems to catch more traction and people tend to lean in a little bit, which is a phrase I hate to say. I actually still want a Free Willy and I still want to have a green car and drive on
Yeah.
vegetable oil. But what's really making this work as we see sustainability, people lose their jobs. I mean, that's happening too. It's falling, in my opinion, it's falling on the art department to be more savvy, and it has to become part of the design equation. And I've used this analogy before. If you're really stoned or you're really drunk and you look into your refrigerator at 1 in the morning and you want a quesadilla, you're going to make a quesadilla. That's how you have to look at reuse. You have to kind of look at it as like, okay, all the cupboards are open. We have to use what we have to use.
Yes.
And that comes from, children's theater all the way up to, the multi-million dollar projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone, a while ago, and the idea of like designing from what we already have, and then kind of the flip side of it, designing from kind of all new, like a blank slate, all new. Which one is more creative, right? And I was arguing
Mm.
from design. I mean, like I'm not a designer, but I'm kind of like we were kind of going back and forth. I was like, no, it's taking what you already have and reimagining it. That is like to me like the most creative like one could be. Where do you sit in that? Like
Well,
how do you think about it?
I mean, it kind of goes to that quesadilla idea is that I just had to make it happen. That was the choice. But I have been asked this in other ways. Would Matlock look like it does had it not been built on other sets? it I couldn't even tell you what that would look like, but I know it would be smaller. And so the volume, the feeling, the scale, the things that people are responding to when they're plugging in and watching it on television, the kind of shiny, glossy magazine quality that it has is because it's built on the foundation of two other shows. And so we were able to use its amort budget to always expand the look. And
Hmm.
so if I didn't have the Good Sam bones, I couldn't even begin to tell you what
Yeah.
it would look like. And I just know that it would be half the size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with the courthouse. I mean, we could not have afforded a courthouse in season one. We just couldn't have. It wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for Fatal Attraction. And and so I guess I would say the benefit is that the show can measure up, meaning it can look as rich, let's say, as a streaming service project on a network show. So now I'm excited by that and I want to keep doing it. But I also know that there's this kind of going way back in our conversation. You kind of become a one-hit wonder, and now you're the guy who can just keep flipping scenery as opposed to making a brand new
Yeah.
world.
Hmm.
And it's a reminder to my showrunners and my producers that I work with that I can also do a lot of things. But right now, I'm doing your show a service by trying to continue to be reuseful, and now it's fun. And now more people, like, I'm meeting you guys, and I've
Yeah.
gotten invited to a lot more events to speak on this because
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are not sure they can retheme. And it's the retheming that I think is what
Yeah.
getting excited by, that like you can take one set and make it look so different. But I'm like, but that's inherently what a production designer does. We tell a story with the walls, just give me a flat wall and I'll make it look, what, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But then the pendulum swings the other way. And I've met production designers who don't want anything to do with it. They want brand new scenery wherever where they go. They have this, in my opinion, illusion that it puts more people to work. I think building from scratch and reuse probably actually use about the same labor. You still need painters and plasterers. And people are like, oh, well, the flat already existed. Well, it has to be cut down. It probably needs more molding. The door still has to function. We still need hardware.
Right.
And as production prep time gets limited, that's not me making that decision.
Yeah.
That's the studio making that decision.
Yeah.
So that's less labor to begin with.
And
Hmm.
just I have quite a few friends here that work in production design and building and carpentry and metal fabrication, and I'm just always in awe of just how quickly they can make amazing things happen as well. So there is on that side too, just an art to the craft of just being able to like whip up anything, um, just like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a business that is designed from improv. It's yes and.
Yeah.
I think Joe
Yeah.
did say that. It's yes and. If there's any industry that can solve this problem, it's the
Yeah.
industry, but it's putting the spotlight on it and making people go, "Hey, look at this thing. We gotta tackle it." There's always more. Backings, for instance, are just giant sheets of plastic that are never going to biodegrade, and everybody wants their own custom. But we're reusing. I mean, the backings outside Matlock are from Glamorous, and they will live there as long as I can defend it,
Yeah.
because it just doesn't make sense to make a 90-foot long, 25-foot tall piece of trash again. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I think like we could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get another chance to do it. But
Yeah,
I'm
anytime. I really mean it. I want to share. I always told people that I'm never going to donate to a university, but I'll give them my mind. So like, I think actually having Joe and I together to
Yeah.
reflect on it would be interesting, because I think we've learned more in the aftermath than we did at the time. And I
uh-huh.
think that
Yeah.
having a postmortem on what we've learned would be interesting, because I think independently we're both taking the lessons and we're applying them to other shows.
I
Okay,
love
well
it.
done. We're going to be circling back and scheduling that because
Let's
anytime I
schedule
can
it.
talk with Joe too, it is just like, I mean, I just love him. He just makes my heart sing when he talks. So I'm just like, let's bring him on again. For sure. No, let's do that. Such a great idea. Such a great idea. Well, Adam, really, really appreciate all of this and all of the work that you're doing and all the creativity and all the effort to get yourself into different situations and different types of projects. It just
Yeah.
makes for a richer experience, I think, when on the next one that you're on, right?
I
So,
think so. Yeah. And I mean, I think if I grew up nowadays, people would probably label me as ADHD. I don't look at it that way. I love all forms of entertainment. I like the storytelling. I mean, the word stories on our butter tub now, like that's how valuable stories are. Like, what's the story behind your butter? Like, why do we
Yeah.
care? But we care. And so like we know that there's value in it, because people are spending, $14,000 to go see Taylor Swift, and they're spending
Yeah.
$170 a day to go to Disneyland. So value is rising. And so the
uh-huh.
people who can do those things and understand those things, and I'm so happy to sit in an industry that has a lot of faces like Los Angeles does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we ask everyone a question, and I'm just curious about your answer. If we're going to put together a playbook on this of like guiding principles for you, for let's just say production design, what would be like the first one or two on your list?
Well, prep is crucial, and
Yeah.
everyone wants to cut it. And I'm so, so tired of defending prep time. Thankfully, this season of Matlock has been very kind, because the prep makes the solution. You have time to think, you can collaborate with your artists. I think the basis of jazz is like you do one thing and I do one thing, and then you do another thing, and we make a great sound.
Yeah.
When you don't have the prep for that, you basically just have noise. And
Yeah.
so, like, having prep weeks are crucial. The teamwork is important. Having people isolated, we could, Good Sam paid for Joe to be with me early in the process. And
Hmm.
we wouldn't be living in these great decisions if it wasn't for that early collaboration. So those two things are great. And then whatever, however the industry decides to evolve itself, there needs to be a better global, and I don't mean this in the world, I mean somebody who's like the sentinel, who's looking ahead and saying, oh, this show's being canceled, this show's starting up, these two shows are starting up, this show's being canceled. And I learned that from John and Frank, because they had this kind of higher vision to say, oh, these shows are happening. A perfect example right now is that shows here at Paramount are getting struck, and there's a lot of trash being made, and it's because no one has a system to communicate to each other. I
Hmm.
don't know what that system is, but that's the missing piece that I'm seeing.
We
And
need a
it,
Dewey
Yeah.
Decibel system that for this kind of stuff or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Tracking and
Yeah,
awesome.
across studio platforms, right?
Yeah,
Not just within
exactly.
one studio domain, right? But across different studios. Yeah.
In order to do that, you have to kind of break down this, like, let's just be secretive about ourselves. And the first the first success that I've seen outside of what I would consider Good Sam, which was all CBS, it was all internal,
Right.
is that A24 has a movie at Universal and they reached out to everyone and they said, hey, we have sets. And it was a sustainability person. And I almost wept. I was like, thank you. This is exactly what it is. But then it fell on that person's responsibility to like, where's this carpet going? Where's this wallpaper going? And I met with the art director who was on that show. They're also busy making the show. And now they're, helping stuff go out. Well, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of stress. So,
Yeah.
Those are three big things that I would say are
I love it. They're great.
Yeah.
All
Adam Rowe.
Thank you, team. This has been great.
Wow.
This
Thank
is great.
you.
This is great.
We can
Cool.
keep chatting.
I know. I'm just like, I want to go on. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.
Okay.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Social media is by Picnic Social. Our producer is Colin Miller.